Prince never trusted the industry. He told me that once in a whisper while adjusting the gain on a vintage ribbon mic during a rehearsal, like it was a truth too sacred to be said out loud. But the night I watched him sit motionless behind a bank of glowing monitors, deep beneath Paisley Park, sipping tea from a porcelain cup while recording one of Diddy Combs' private parties, I finally understood how deep that mistrust ran. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. What we saw that night would change everything. My name is Julian Cross. I was his sound engineer, just a contractor at first. I didn't sign up to be part of a surveillance op that could destroy careers, topple megastars, and possibly summon something I don't even have words for. But here I am. It started 3 weeks before that night. Prince had summoned me and a wiry, near-silent video tech named Mark from Chanhassen. He told us he wanted a full passive feed system installed throughout the west wing of the mansion. No Wi-Fi, no cloud sync, analog redundancy, hardwired backup, sound filters running through custom EQ stacks, all off-grid. He called it the cleansing. I thought it was an art project. He said it was for the people. When we were done, he smiled not kindly, but like a man who'd finally finished drawing a map into a storm. Now, he said, we wait. That night, the house transformed. Soft purple mood lighting spilled across every hallway. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and cedar oil. Jazz curled faintly through the walls like something breathing beneath the wallpaper. I was in the bunker 3 stories underground, monitoring sound levels and crossfeeds while Mark kept his eyes on 10 mounted screens, each tuned to a hidden camera feed covering every angle of the party upstairs. Then came the guests. First one black SUV, then another, then a parade of them. No license plates, tinted glass, drivers who never spoke. The first guest was a former child star turned billion-dollar mogul. She wore pink sunglasses even though it was night, her shoulders tense, her mouth flat. No entourage, no smiles. Then a man who made his name playing strong men in courtrooms and action flicks. He paused at the gate, glanced behind him, and slipped in alone. More followed, an R&B crooner with a shaved head and a voice like syrup, a TV host with a mustache you could recognize in silhouette, a pop darling who had just released a family-friendly album 3 months prior, a mega producer known for wearing sunglasses indoors, and then, surprisingly, a preacher. Not just any preacher. A world-famous televangelist known for his fiery sermons and healing crusades. He looked uncomfortable. None of them were allowed security. That was Diddy Combs' rule. Their bodyguards were stopped at the door by a man with a discreet earpiece and a clipboard. No confrontation. Just a quiet, firm, "You can't go in." Some accepted it. Others hesitated, argued, then complied. A few stayed parked down the street, still visible in the outer cam's corner. Silent shadows watching from the distance. Mark leaned in. Something's off. I didn't answer. My stomach had already begun to tighten. Then we saw him, Diddy Comb, on screen, walking the halls alone, dragging his fingers across velvet walls like he was searching for a vibration. He stopped outside room 19, a windowless chamber with a round rug, an old ceiling fan, and no natural light. He opened the door and muttered, "Oh yeah, this one's perfect for it." Then the audio feed from that room went dead. I checked my board. Nothing. No levels, no waveforms. I looked at Prince. He was already watching. I whispered, Audio's out in 19. He didn't flinch. Reset it. Manually. He said it like he already knew, like the silence was a threshold. I grabbed my pouch and a comm earpiece and made my way upstairs. The hallways were dreamlike. Dim purple light, velvet shadows, the sound of laughter echoing faintly behind closed doors. I moved quickly, slipping past an unmarked stairwell and the locked music archive until I reached room 19. The door was slightly ajar. I eased it open and stepped inside. The air was thick and humid, like a greenhouse in July. I dropped to one knee beside the wall sconce and reached for the receiver hidden beneath the baseboard. I had just started recalibrating the panel when the door creaked open behind me. Voices, footsteps, one high-pitched, animated, familiar. I dove into the supply closet and pulled the door nearly closed, leaving just a sliver to see through. Diddy entered, carrying a plastic bin full of baby oil bottles, dozens of them. His face was flushed, grinning. He began humming tunelessly, bouncing on his heels like a child who'd just found a secret fort. "Yeah, this is it," he whispered. "Time to get the real party started." He placed the bin in the center of the rug and began miming strange movements with his hands, ritualistic, circular, like someone practicing a ceremony he'd performed 100 times. There was no music, just his breath and the faint squeak of the rug beneath his feet. After a few minutes, he stopped and left as suddenly as he'd come, not even closing the door behind him. I waited 10 seconds, then 20. My heart was pounding. I emerged, wiped sweat from my lip, and reconnected the receiver. A green light blinked twice. Audio restored. I moved quickly back to the bunker, heart still pounding, unsure what I'd just witnessed. Prince didn't look at me. "Good," he said quietly. Mark pointed to the monitors. "They're heading to that room. All of them." One by one, the guests filtered through the hallway toward room 19. Heads lowered, mouths tight, expressions unreadable. No laughter now, no champagne, no flirtation. This wasn't a party anymore. It was something else. Prince leaned forward, his tea forgotten. "Now watch what they do when they think no one's watching." Diddy stood at the door of room 19, welcoming each guest inside like a host greeting pilgrims at a temple. The chandelier camera caught everything. Actors, moguls, musicians, pastors, all stepping into the circle. The preacher moved to the center, wordless, calm. He removed his blazer, his shirt, folded each garment carefully and placed them on a velvet ottoman. He stood bare-chested, not ashamed but submitted. Diddy approached with a bottle, thick, golden. He poured it into his hands and began coating the preacher's shoulders, back, arms, not gently, methodically. Others followed, a woman in a sequined dress, a man in an Armani tux. They each took turns anointing him. Then the preacher knelt. The chanting began. At first it was incoherent half-breaths, low hums. Then it formed rhythm, a cadence, a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. It vibrated through the room like heat. The lighting dimmed. One guest pulled the chandelier cord. The bulbs clicked out, leaving only candles. Shadows bloomed across the walls. The oil shimmered across the preacher's skin like glass. He began to sway. The chants deepened. I adjusted the EQ. Nothing to fix, no distortion. This was live. This was real. Something ancient rose in that room, not figuratively, literally. I could feel it in my chest. Prince didn't move, just watched. Mark was breathing heavy, pale. The frequency on the audio feed didn't match any human register. It pulsed like breath, wet and heavy, like something watching us through the sound itself. The preacher collapsed fully to the floor. Guests poured oil on him from above. Others began stripping off designer clothing, whispering to each other in tones of reverence. One man spun in place like he was possessed. Another murmured to a woman curled on the floor. The chandelier swung despite no movement. Then I heard it. A second sound, beneath the chant, deeper than the low end. A hum I couldn't trace. It didn't come from the room. It came from underneath it, inside it. Mark vomited into a trash bin and collapsed to his knees. I froze. My fingers hovered over the dials like they were lifelines. Prince stared forward, eyes glassy. "What is this?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because this wasn't performance, it was communion. And whatever they were summoning, it had already arrived. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Something deeper than fear held my gaze, like my body had been hijacked by the same rhythm that pulsed through that room. The chandelier above room 19 now rocked in slow hypnotic arcs, casting twisted shadows that curled along the velvet walls like tendrils, each flickering movement mimicking some grotesque pantomime of what was happening beneath it. The preacher was on all fours now, his body glistening with oil and sweat and something else I didn't want to name. One of the guests, a woman in a high-slit black gown, leaned down and whispered something into his ear, and the moment her lips moved, the chanting shifted again, now layered with breathy syllables that didn't match any known language. I tried to isolate the audio feed, to run it through the analyzer, but the waveform returned jagged and erratic, like it was coming from outside the known audio spectrum. The subharmonics were off, not just low, but crooked, like sound folded into itself. The preacher began to tremble violently, his hands clawing into the rug, his mouth stretched open in a scream that didn't make a sound. The microphones in the room all read silence, and yet the monitors showed every tendon in his neck straining, his body writhing in perfect agony. One of the guests poured another bottle of oil directly into his mouth, while others rubbed more across his spine and shoulders like they were polishing an offering. I saw one man spinning, arms extended, eyes closed, a wide grin plastered on his face that never reached his eyes. Another man unbuttoned his shirt with shaking fingers and knelt beside the preacher, lips moving silently as he mimicked a prayer or a curse or both. The air in the surveillance room grew heavy. Mark clutched his stomach, dry heaving now, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Julian, we have to stop this," he gasped. "This isn't just sick. It's wrong. It's not human." I looked at Prince. He hadn't moved. His eyes were locked onto the screen, his jaw set tight. "We stop nothing," he said, his voice low but sharp. "We document. We finish. This is what they never wanted the world to see." His hand hovered over the backup drive like a priest ready to seal a holy relic. The chanting reached a fever pitch. The guests began to move in unison, a pulsing circle of flesh and shimmer, their mouths wide open in primal release, groaning and humming as if their throats had become tunnels for something else to speak through. At one point, the chandelier shuddered so violently that its central crystal snapped free and dropped into the middle of the circle, bouncing once against the rug before disappearing into the oil-slick floor like it had been swallowed whole. I checked the mic feeds again. Still no vocal frequencies. Just the hum. That impossible hum. The analyzer showed peaks and valleys and ranges that didn't correspond to anything natural. No animal, no machine. Frequencies that hovered at the edge of perception like sound you feel in your bones but never quite hear. I said, "Prince, this isn't earthly." He nodded, slowly, without surprise. "I know." Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keep listening. There's more." On the monitor, the preacher had risen back to his knees, his arms spread wide, slick with oil, his body trembling. His mouth moved again, slowly this time, like he was forming a phrase syllable by syllable. The guests went quiet, utterly silent. They stood around him in a perfect ring, heads bowed, hands dripping. And then nothing. The room was still. No one moved. No one spoke. For maybe 10 seconds, the frame looked like a still image until one guest collapsed, arms limp, her body hitting the floor with a wet slap. Another followed, and another, not fallen like fainting victims, but like puppets whose strings had been cut. Diddy stood over the preacher, still grinning, his hands raised, and then he said something. No mic caught it. No lip-reading software would ever decode it. But I felt it. In my molars, in my fingernails, in the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. The preacher screamed again, mouth stretched open in that same terrible silence. And this time, I saw something move behind him. Not a person, not a shadow, a shape, a distortion in the air, like heat shimmer but denser, darker, like grief made visible. Mark whimpered, pressing his palms to his ears. "Make it stop, please, make it stop." I didn't move. I couldn't. The shape behind the preacher grew, expanded, not with speed, but with certainty, like it had always been there waiting to be seen. The lights flickered, the candles dimmed, and then every guest in the circle dropped to their knees, one after another, as if on command. No words, no cue, just submission. And the preacher, he began to speak, or rather, something began to speak through him. Words, no. Sounds, no. Vibrations crawled out of his throat, low and rolling, like thunder wrapped in gravel. The EQ board spiked violently. Mark collapsed again, sobbing. I tried to disconnect the feed, just to make the sound stop, but Prince reached across and slapped my hand away. "No," he growled. "We finish this." On screen, the preacher's body convulsed, back arched, arms twisting at unnatural angles. The sound continued, louder now, echoing not just in our ears but in the very structure of the room. I felt the walls vibrating. The screen cracked in its corner. Prince whispered, almost to himself, "It's working." The final moment came with no crescendo, just a sudden stillness. All the guests were frozen, heads bowed. Diddy stepped into the center, placed a hand on the preacher's head, and whispered something so softly the cameras couldn't catch it. Then the preacher collapsed, fully, motionless. The others stood, one by one, slowly, without speaking. They wiped their hands on whatever they could find, jackets, rugs, the wall. Some were barefoot, oil dripping from their toes. They exited the room in silence. No applause, no farewell, just slow, reverent withdrawal. The preacher remained, a crumpled figure on the floor, chest barely rising. We watched until the last guest slipped through the hallway and vanished into the early morning darkness. Prince exhaled slowly for the first time in hours. That, he said, was proof. We began packing. Hard drives, duplicates, audio banks, isolated frequencies. Prince insisted on no wireless transfers, everything physical, everything hidden. "Come back in 3 days," he said, locking the drives in a compartment I'd never seen before. We'll finish the rest." I nodded, still stunned. As I left that night, I looked back one last time through the hallway toward room 19. The door was open. The rug was stained dark. And though I heard nothing, I swore I could feel something still watching me from inside. 3 days later, I returned to Paisley Park just after sunrise, and everything felt wrong from the moment I stepped onto the gravel drive. There were no staff, no movement behind the windows, no faint jazz curling out from the vents like before. The usual soft purple glow that bathed the outer walls had gone cold, replaced with a pale, sterile blue that made the mansion look less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. I stood at the main entrance longer than I meant to, waiting for a sound, a whisper, anything. But nothing came. I let myself in. Prince had given me a key card 2 weeks prior, told me never to lose it, and I hadn't. The doors opened without a sound. The interior was still, lights off, shadows long and uninterrupted. I called out once, not loudly, just enough to break the air, but my voice died in my throat. I moved quickly, down the hallway, past the music archive and the storage loft, into the access corridor that led to the surveillance bunker. The keypad blinked green before I even touched it, as if expecting me. That was the first thing that bothered me. Prince never left that door unlocked. Inside, the air was stale. The kind of stale that comes from fear more than disuse. The monitors were all dark, the console off. A few cables coiled neatly on the desk like someone had wrapped them with shaken hands. My microphone bag sat in the corner, half-zipped, untouched. My water bottle from 3 nights ago still sat open beside the EQ board. But something was off, too off. I knelt to grab my gear. That's when I felt it. Not a noise, not a draft, but a shift, like the room had inhaled. I turned slowly, heart already racing. The room was empty. But something was watching me. I could feel it. Not just a presence, but an attention. Thick and concentrated, like standing in front of a massive eye that hadn't blinked in 100 years. That's when I saw the mirror. It was tucked behind a shelf I hadn't noticed before, a tall, narrow thing covered in dust, with a wood-carved frame etched in strange symbols I didn't recognize. I swear to God it hadn't been there before. I don't know what compelled me to move closer. Maybe curiosity. Maybe stupidity. But I did. And when I stood in front of it, I saw it. In the reflection, just past the edge of the frame where the light fell off, was a figure. Tall, thin, not exactly humanoid, not exactly smoke, but somewhere in between. Like something trying to become flesh and failing just enough to remain terrifying. Its body rippled like a flame underwater. But its eyes, they were the only part that didn't blur, the only part that didn't flicker. They locked onto mine. I froze. My body refused to obey. My breath stuck in my chest, my hands still on my bag. I turned my head. Nothing there. I looked back at the mirror, still there, unmoving, watching. Its head tilted slightly, not menacing, just curious. And that was somehow worse. I bolted. My body finally responded, and I ran down the corridor, up the hallway, through the front doors, into the blinding morning light. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. The key slipped once in my hand from sweat and terror, but I started the engine and didn't look back. I drove until the mansion vanished behind the tree line. I didn't speak. I didn't think. I just kept driving. I didn't return Prince's calls. Not that he made any. I didn't send a text. I didn't check my email. I didn't want to know. For weeks I told myself it had all been a hallucination, a breakdown, a bad dream nested inside a worse one. But then I woke up on April 21st, 2016, to a headline that sucked the air from my lungs. Prince found dead in elevator. Fentanyl overdose suspected. No signs of foul play, no autopsy questions, just a clean close, a quiet exit, and a narrative that didn't make sense. Prince was the most meticulous person I'd ever met. The man micromanaged his tea temperature. There was no way he accidentally overdosed on anything. But no one pushed back. No one asked questions. I knew what I'd seen. I knew what we'd recorded. And I knew that vault he locked the drives in had been emptied long before the police arrived. I tried to tell myself it was over, that whatever happened in that room had been sealed with him. But then came the trial. Cassie Ventura. Her voice, broken and trembling, cut through the courtroom audio like a blade. She spoke of oil, rituals, the silence. She mentioned the names of people you're not supposed to name in public. Her testimony hit me like a car crash in the slow motion. I watched every second of that grainy live stream with the volume turned all the way up, my heart pounding in my throat. Then she said something that made my hands go cold. He wasn't the only one recording. My mouth went dry. She didn't say Paisley Park. She didn't have to. That night, I unplugged everything in my apartment. The router, the TV, the smart thermostat. I turned off my phone. I blacked out every window and slept in the bathtub with a flashlight in one hand and a folding knife in the other. I haven't lived a normal life since. Every few weeks, something happens. An SUV I don't recognize parks outside my building and stays just long enough to make me uncomfortable. A package arrives with no return address and nothing inside. An email hits my inbox with no subject, no body, just a single timestamp. My dog barks at shadows that weren't there the night before. And sometimes when I walk past mirrors at night, I swear I see something behind me that isn't me. Not a reflection, not even a presence, a suggestion, like the ghost of an idea trying to take shape. I haven't spoken to Mark. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know where the drives are. Maybe they've already been destroyed. Maybe not. Maybe someone out there still has a copy. If so, I hope they're braver than I am. I told myself I was done. I told myself to forget. But I can't. Because that sound from room 9 still lives in my body like an infection that can't be cured. That hum. That impossible hum. The one that didn't come from mouths or machines or music. The one that bent reality. That reached through walls and mirrors and flesh. The one that killed Prince. The one that marked me. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because if you're seeing this video, it means I'm probably already gone. And if I am, someone needs to know. Someone needs to finish what he started. Someone needs to take them down. I didn't plan to speak again, not publicly, not even to myself. But last night, something changed. I woke at 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat, my dog growling low at the wall beside the closet. Not barking, just growling, low and guttural like he was warning something that wouldn't leave. I turned on every light in the house, and for the first time in years I opened the box, the one I swore I'd never open. The one with the last remaining backup drive. It was buried beneath layers of junk in a false-bottomed toolbox. I had almost forgotten how I packed it, how carefully I wrapped it with anti-static sheets and lined the casing with rubber insulation. My hands were trembling as I powered up my old laptop, the one with no internet card, no mic, no camera. The one Prince gave me. It took nearly 10 minutes for the feed to load. The file had no title, no metadata, just a timestamp and a single word, watch. I did. It was footage I hadn't seen, different angle. The chandelier came from above room 19, but this time it didn't cut out when the ritual ended. It kept recording. The preacher was still kneeling in the center of the room. The guests had left, but he remained, his chest heaving, eyes shut tight like he was listening to something that hadn't stopped talking. Then he rose slowly and faced the chandelier. He smiled, but it wasn't joy, it was devotion, like a man seeing God for the first time. He extended his arms and whispered something that made the monitor glitch for a second, like the signal itself didn't want to transmit what he said. Then the lights went out. Total black. But the audio kept rolling. For 43 minutes. Just that hum. Louder now, purer, no chanting, no breathing, just the hum. And underneath it, something else. A voice, not words, not anything I can quote, just a pressure that sounded like it was speaking directly to the blood in my veins. I watched all of it. When it ended, the screen returned to static, and then it blinked white, and a line of text appeared. You still see. I shut the laptop, ripped the drive out, and threw up in the kitchen sink. That was 6 hours ago. Since then, I've received 3 emails. Blank. All sent at exactly 4:04 a.m. Subject lines, Room 19. He knew. Now you do. I haven't opened them. I don't need to. They've already said what they came to say. I know now why Prince called it the cleansing. It wasn't to expose just the individuals. It was to expose the system, the machine, the thing behind the faces. The rituals were not about pleasure or power. They were about invitation. And what they invited was no longer waiting. It's here. It walks in mansions. It lives in mirrors. It hums through frequencies you'll never detect, but always feel. It doesn't want fame. It doesn't want worship. It wants silence, obedience, participation. And if you've watched this far, you've already heard it too. That frequency has a way of finding cracks in your mind, slipping through, settling in. You'll start by noticing it in your dreams. Then you'll feel it in your bones. Then, one day you'll look in a mirror and see that your reflection isn't blinking when you do. And by then, it'll be too late. I'm leaving tonight. I've packed only what I can carry. Cash, flashlight, my dog. The laptop is going with me. Not because I want to preserve it, but because I can't risk it falling into someone else's hands. This tape, the one you're watching, is the only thing I'm leaving behind. It's encrypted. It's mirrored across burner accounts. It will activate only if I miss 3 check-ins. If this is online, it means I've either disappeared or died. Maybe both. And if that's the case, I need you to know one last thing. Prince wasn't afraid. Not even at the end. That look in his eyes the night we watched the ritual, it wasn't fear, it was certainty. He knew, he always knew, that's why he recorded it. That's why he brought us in. He didn't expect to survive it, but he hoped we might. The truth isn't safe, but it's necessary, and now it's yours, all of it. I've done what I can, I've passed it on, and now I'm going somewhere the signal can't reach, where the mirrors are just glass, where hums don't live in the walls. If you never hear from me again, don't look for me. Don't call. Don't come near Paisley Park. Burn everything. Delete this file. And never, never enter a room with no windows and a velvet rug. Especially if the chandelier sways. Especially if the lights flicker. Especially if you hear it, the hum. Because that means it's already found you.